Hello, guys. So, in this session, we will be talking about the perspectives on the study of caste system. So, there's a topic from your paper too, and consider this as a revision session. So, this is going to be a short session, and I'll not be able to cover everything like the way we do in the class. So, this is actually a revision session for those who have already completed the topic. Okay. The first thing, you can get a long question of 20 marker about the perspectives of caste system. You can get short notes also like G.S. Ghurye's perspective, M.N. Srinivas perspective, Louis Dumont perspective, and Andre Beteille perspective. So these are going to be like short notes. Or simply they'll ask you perspectives on caste system. In that case, you need to write about all the four perspectives and others also. So that's exactly what I'm planning here. I'll be discussing everything about the perspectives of Indian caste system. So here it is not specific to one or two thinkers. So I'll try to cover everything, and I'll give you an introduction where we talk about importance of studying caste system in Indian society. And then we can talk about the contribution of key sociologists like G.S. Ghurye, M.N. Srinivas, Louis Dumont, Andre Beteille. And then we take up one by one. Okay, we'll talk about G.S. Ghurye. And then when we talk about, suppose you are getting a short question on G.S. Ghurye, right? Then what all things you need to cover? You need to cover origin of caste. And in that, you need to talk about Aryan racial superiority, role of endogamy and rituals, codification through religious text you can write, and then the features of caste system, very important, the six characteristics like segmental division, hierarchy, occupational restrictions, privileges and disabilities, commensality restrictions, and marriage restrictions. And then you need to talk about the perspectives on untouchability, the Brahminical dominance and the relegation of non-Aryans. And then you talk about the future of caste, role of caste associations in education and reforms, risk of caste conflict undermining national integrity. And then you talk about criticism of Ghurye. So this is like refutations by scholars like Andre Beteille, Gail Omvet, and then accusation of Brahminical bias and lack of field work. So these are the criticisms you can write. So this is how you will be writing G.S. Ghurye. So these are the things which are going to be included in your answer, whether it is a short note on G.S. Ghurye or long question on G.S. Ghurye. So this need to be captured depending upon the space and the time, and it depends on the mark of the question. Similarly, other thinkers also. So here what we will do, again, let's suppose they are asking you a question on M.N. Srinivas. What all things you need to write? You talk about Varna and caste. In that, you will talk about the difference between theoretical scheme, that is Varna, and what is practical, caste, which is Jadi. And then you talk about intermixing of Varna categories and the localized caste realities. And then you talk about the structure of caste. In that, you talk about ritual structure like purity, pollution, worship, and food habits. Then you talk about the secular structure, where you talk about the power, wealth, and education. And then you need to definitely talk about the concepts like Sanskritization, dominant caste. So that is again providing caste mobility. And you can talk about, examples of upward caste mobility through emulation. So dominant caste example, his studies and everything you can mention. Caste and politics you need to mention. The concept of dominant caste here again, based on land ownership, numerical strength, and political power. And give examples like Marathas, Jats, and Lingayats. And then talk about criticisms like you can use Ghanshyam Shah, you can use Yogesh Atal and Anand Chakravarti. All these I have given in the notes. So if you have not attended my course or mentorship program, still you can get all the notes and PDF where everything is covered systematically and in detail, and that you can get the details in the description. Check out the description where you'll get the complete PDF of Sociology Paper 1 and Paper 2 free of cost. So get that and prepare that. And in case if you're looking for any mentorship program or test series, you can get in touch with us. The details are given. Again, next they can ask you about Louis Dumont. So here it is attributional approach. So you need to talk about that analysis of caste as a unique form of inequality. Then talk about emphasis on religious values and the purity pollution binary. Then you need to talk about caste versus class, the contrast between caste hierarchy in India and class stratification in the West. And then criticism, like we talk about normally Berman, Dibankar Gupta, John Mencher. And then, you have Andre Beteille also. So these are the four, which is actually given in the syllabus. That's why we are covering this. Then we need to talk about broader perspectives and everything, if the question is in general, right? So when you talk about Andre Beteille, you talk about caste and class, caste, class, power, you can discuss. Integration of caste and class in stratification, poverty and pollution as twin axes of exclusion. And then you talk about criticisms of reservation, impacts on meritocracy, caste consciousness, and vertical divisions. And then comparison with Dumont. That's very important. So Beteille actually rejects the Dumont view of caste as unique to India. And that again, you need to cover over there. Then apart from that, other criticisms. Then the broader perspective, right? Here you talk about microstructure, macrostructure, like the difference between caste, as a local reality, and Varna as a pan-Indian framework. And then secularization of caste, where talk about transformation of caste under modernity and politics. So secularization of caste, politicization of caste, and rise of primordial identities like reasons of resurgence of caste, family, religion, right? And then we will summarize everything. If the question is in general about the perspective, you summarize everything and then you conclude. So you talk about implications of caste studies in modern sociology and policy making towards the end in last sentence. So this is how your answer should look like. All these things need to be incorporated based on the requirement and demand of the question. Why I told this much is because in case if you get specific question, all these need to be there. If it is a general question, you need to touch upon everything that I have mentioned. May not be able to get space and time to write it completely. So here we will anyway focus in general and consider this as only a revision session, because each of the topic, each of the perspective in itself have to take at least one session. Sometimes when we talk about Beteille, Dumont and all, it take more than one session. Srinivas is easy, GS Ghurye is easy. This I do generally in one day. Okay, so consider in that way. So if you have already covered the chapter on caste system, then this will help you for revision. So guys, if you see the caste system, how can you write the introduction? Caste system in India, in fact, represent one of the most enduring and complex social hierarchies in the world. So it has shaped Indian society for centuries and influencing the economic, social, political, and the cultural fabric of the nation. So then you can bring in the scholars, right? The sociologists like G.S. Ghurye, M.N. Srinivas, Louis Dumont, Andre Beteille have analyzed caste from diverse angles and offering critical insights into its structure, function, and transformations. So here we will be talking about that. This is how you will be giving the introduction, right? So what is caste? And you bring about the scholars, since it is a general answer on perspectives on caste. If it is specific, you talk about that specific thing there. And then we are going to start with G.S. Ghurye. So here, when you talk about the origin, you can say book name is important. So Ghurye, in his book Caste and Race in India, explored the origins of caste through a historical and racial view. So here you talk about Aryan distinction. Ghurye partially supported Risley's theory that caste originated as a racial distinction between the Aryans and the indigenous tribes. So Aryans maintained their superiority and purity through practices like endogamy, certain exclusive rituals like that. So when we talk about endogamy, what does that mean? Marrying within their group to prevent the dilution of their racial identity. So endogamy is practiced, and then religious practices that symbolize their higher status. That's what exclusive rights, right? And then codification of social norms in texts like Rig Veda, which again institutionalized the caste distinction, right? So, but still, G.S. Ghurye noted that the concept of racial purity was more prevalent in North India, where Aryan influence was stronger. But intermixing was evident when it comes to other parts of the country, especially in South India. Now, the most important aspect, that is the features of caste. So here, 6 features that should be there. You can remember like acronym SHOPCM, SHOPCM. So segmental division of society, hierarchy, occupational restrictions, privileges and disabilities, commensality restrictions, and marriage restrictions. So caste are rigidly, defined, right? So with each group assigned specific roles and responsibilities. So there is a very clear segmental division and a fixed stratification with Brahmins at the top and Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and Dalits at the bottom, or apart from Varna system, Avarnas. So there is a clear hierarchy, and then limited choices of occupation, typically inherited from previous generation. So there is an occupational restriction. And then the higher caste enjoy the privileges like access to education, but lower caste face disabilities like being barred from public spaces, right? So privileges and disabilities. And then rules governing food sharing to prevent pollution. That's a commensality restrictions. And then there is a concept of strict endogamy, as I discussed before, to maintain that caste purity. So there are marriage restrictions, right? So these features reflect how caste functioned in a very rigid social order, influencing every aspect of social life. Now, you can talk about perspective on untouchability, right? So in fact, Ghurye viewed untouchability as a direct result of Brahminical dominance. So Aryan influence, non-Aryan considered impure, who were in fact relegated to the status of untouchables. Religious texts like Manusmriti in fact institutionalized these practices, legitimizing the exclusion of untouchables. So what is the future of caste? Ghurye predicted the rise of caste associations to address educational and social reform needs, but he warned against their misuse in competitive politics, which could lead to caste-based conflicts and then threaten national unity. Now, what are the criticism? As I told you, talk about Andre Beteille, Rajni Kothari, Gail Ormwood, and general criticisms. What is the general criticism? Ghurye's work has been described as a Brahminical and elitist with limited engagement in field studies. This is a general criticism which you can write in all questions related to Ghurye. And Gail Ormwood criticized Ghurye for overlooking caste movements and protest. Rajni Kothari highlighted the positive role of caste associations in fostering social mobility. Andre Beteille rejected the racial genesis of caste, and he argued that cultural and historical factors were more significant than the racial aspect. So these are the things that should be there if the question is asked on Ghurye, or if you're writing a general answer, even if not this much, but still you need to incorporate much of this. And then it again depends on the question, how much to add from each of these. Right now we need to move to M.N. Srinivas. So first we talk about Varna and caste. So Srinivas differentiated between Varna, which is a theoretical construct, and then the caste, which is a practical reality, caste or Jadi. And talk about Rigveda and ambiguity. The Rigveda describes Varna, but does not clearly define whether it denotes color or occupation. Okay, and then regional variations. So Varna provided a broad template, but caste varied significantly across regions. And that's emphasizing the need for localized studies and field studies. So Srinivas argued that the caste, unlike Varna, allowed mobility, as seen in process like Sanskritization, and that you can define later. Right, and if you look at the structure of caste, he identified, two interrelated components of caste. That's a ritual structure and a secular structure. When we talk about ritual structure, these are defined by cultural practices like purity, food habits, and worship. When we talk about the social secular structure, which is based on economic power, education, and the political influence. Now, concept of Sanskritization, everyone should be knowing this, right? So even if you're going for interview, they'll ask you a question about this. In my interview, I directly got the first question from Sanskritization only in one of my interviews. So these are very important basic concepts. There is no point in wasting time in discussing this in a revision session. There's a very important concept introduced by Sanskrit, Srinivas. Sanskritization means the process by which the lower caste, they try to imitate the practices of higher caste, and they'll try to improve their social status. And if not in this generation, next generation, they'll get that benefit. Yadavas adopting Kshatriya customs, Rajgons, claiming the Kshatriya status. These are examples. And interrelation with secular mobility, you talk. Ritual mobility, in fact, often follows a secular achievement, such as, you get the land ownership or political power, like that. Then you talk about caste and politics. So here he introduced the concept of dominant caste and who holds power because of certain elements, because of land ownership, numerical strength, political influence, modern education. So it's not necessary that you need to be Brahmin to become dominant in an area. And it is other way also, even if you are a Brahmin in an area, it is not necessary that you can be dominant in that area. So there are other conditions. So a Kshatriya can be dominant in an area, or a Vaishya can also be dominant if you possess land ownership, numerical strength, political influence, and modern education. So you can talk about examples like Marathas in Maharashtra, Jats in Haryana, Yadavs and all. Okay. Now the criticisms of Srinivas. Talk about Ghanshyam Shah, Yogesh Adil, and T.K. Uman. So Ghanshyam Shah, in fact, criticized the notion of dominant caste as a form of class mobilization. Yogesh Adil highlighted the contextual nature of caste dominance. All these are given in the PDF in detail, so I'm just going through the criticism. So see, T.K. Uman, in fact, noted the exclusion of Dalit struggles. Okay, so that's about Srinivas. Now let's move on to Louis Dumont. So here his approach is attributional approach, and you need to talk about the book name, of course. So in his book Homo Hierarchicus, Dumont analyzed caste as a unique form of inequality sustained by religious values. Okay, and he proposed concept of purity, pollution, mutual dependence. So ritual purity is governed by caste interactions, and that's legitimizing the social hierarchy. Then mutual dependence. So upper caste maintain ritual purity, but lower caste again absorb the pollution, but again that created interdependence. So there is a concept of mutual dependence. Purity pollution is very important. Again, everything is based on purity and pollution. At the top, it is pure. At the bottom, it is impure. So purity again varies from the top to bottom. So next level, less pure than the top, but more pure than the bottom. Again, these guys are less pure than the top, but more pure than the bottom. And finally, most impure are the ones who are away from the Varna structure, which are Avarnas or the Dalits. Then he talked about caste versus class. So he contrasted caste societies in India with class societies in West. So in India, if you see, status and power are separate. Brahmins may have higher status but low economic power. So status and power is separate. And if you look at West, the status and power are intertwined and making mobility more feasible. So then you can talk about criticism of Berman, Dibankar Gupta, John Mencher. So Berman argued that the power and status are inseparable. But what Dumont said is different, right? And then Dibankar Gupta criticized, Dumont for Brahminical bias. And then John Mencher highlighted, caste exploitative nature. Now coming to the next one, Andre Beteille. So see guys, here you need to talk about again class and caste, class, power. So Beteille emphasized that caste alone does not determine the stratification. There are, he followed the Weberian approach, the three-dimensional approach. He talked about economic exclusion. Poverty exacerbates social exclusion, challenging Dumont's purity pollution framework. And also he talked about inter-caste hierarchies. The castes are dynamic with internal divisions and overlapping economic roles. Now, there are criticisms on reservation, like he's talking about these as reinforcing the caste identities and undermining meritocracy and dividing, society along vertical lines and all those. So apart from that, you talk about the perspective, you talk about the criticism on Beteille, which I have discussed in the beginning itself. So that's how you will be answering a question if you get in a general way to write, the perspectives on the caste system, perspective on the study of caste system. What if you get a specific question on Andre Beteille? Go very specific and discuss more about that. If you get general, you need to get a balanced answer where you cover each of these thinkers with their criticisms and their concepts and everything. Otherwise, go specific and in-depth of each of that which is asked in the question. That's the only difference. And everything is covered. And how can you write the conclusion? You can say caste system. It's rooted in tradition. It continues to evolve under the influence of modernity, politics, and social reforms. Ghurye, Srinivas, Dumont, Beteille, they provided complementary insights into the complexities, which is revealing its historical origins and structural dynamics and the socio-political implications. So understanding caste through these perspectives not only enrich sociological inquiry, but also informs the policymaking or policymakers to address its challenges as well. So this way you can conclude. So make sure that you have completed the areas that I have discussed, each of the topics that I have mentioned. That's when you will be completing this particular topic. Okay, so that's about this session, guys. And if you find the video helpful, please share it with your friends also. And in case if you're looking for any mentorship program or the sociology test series or the course, check out the details in the description. You can consider joining us. And also, if you are looking for the PDF of this lecture or the complete sociology course, you can get it for free of cost. Check out the description. So see you in the next session. Thank you so much.